Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of New England Chapter Connects. As Regina mentioned, our topic today, application to allocation, mastering municipal grants for public works in your community. With an abundance of grant programs available to communities, this is another important and timely topic. For today's session, we have an exceptional panel of grant administrators and specialists that will help you unlock the secrets of securing and maximizing grants for your municipal projects. So, and we have another great turnout. We had a lot of people register, and I think some folks are still joining us as we get started here. So welcome, everybody. My name is Rich Benevento, and I am the APWA Region 1 Director and the co-chair of the New England Chapter Public Works Awareness Committee. This week, of course, is National Public Works Week, really a time to celebrate the hard work and dedication of our public works community. National Public Works Week is also an opportunity to promote your department, recognize your staff, engage in the community, and raise awareness of the importance of public works in our community and in our lives. So hopefully you have activities going on in your community, and we know a lot of communities have had touch-a-trucks and all sorts of things going on. So bravo, and keep that going. Yesterday was the New England Chapter's National Public Works Week luncheon. It was a great opportunity to celebrate Public Works and all of our New England Chapter APWA National Award winners as well. So congratulations to all the award winners. Just a couple of things before we get started. First, many thanks to our Public Works Awareness Committee for doing great work to promote the value and importance of public works in our communities and in our lives. It's a great group doing real work to promote the value of public works. There has also been valuable collaboration with the New England Chapter Education Committee, working together to bring topics to you that are interesting, informative, and really beneficial to our members. So we hope that you'll continue to tune in. The Public Works Awareness Committee continues to grow. That said, we're always looking for new members. So if you're interested in getting involved with the committee, please reach out to me, Julie Piancentini, my co-chair, or send Regina at the Connecticut T2 Center your contact information, and we'll make sure we can get in touch with you. That said, a big shout out to our New England Chapter Connects producer, Regina Hackett, and the entire team at the Connecticut T2 Center. They do an amazing job producing our New England Chapter Connects program. And a shout out to our New England Chapter Connects chair, Ellington, Connecticut Director of Public Works, Tom Mozalewski. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Regina. You guys do great work, and we're so happy that you can help out with this program. And of course, a special thanks to our New England Chapter sponsors. Without the support of our sponsors, we could not bring all the valuable programs and events to our members and the public works community. So just a reminder that the New England Chapter 3-day summer conference is coming up on June 12th through the 14th at the Seacrest Beach Hotel in North Yarmouth, Mass. All of these chapter events are made possible because of the generous support of our sponsors. Their continuous support of our chapter and our public works community is so very important. So we want to thank all of our New England Chapter sponsors, and we hope that you'll thank them as well. The New England Chapter Connects program was created to keep us all connected and informed while we were isolated during COVID. We hope that you will find the New England Chapter Connects series worthwhile and informative and a way to stay connected. This will be our last session before our summer break. We'll be picking up again in September with new and important topics to help you manage your operations. So stay tuned for that. You can see that one on September 26th. Increasing efficiency in winter maintenance, weather, and road weather. That obviously is very timely, right around the fall time. So we hope that you'll tune in for that. And also, if you miss a session, you can also replay these sessions for your staff by just jumping onto the New England Chapter website, where all of these sessions can be found, and you can replay them at any time. Lastly, if you're not an APWA member and you'd like to be, or you'd like more information on upcoming New England Chapter Connect sessions, or if you're just interested in being a sponsor, all of this information can be found on the New England Chapter website at newengland.apwa.net. So let's get at it. Let me introduce our panel for today. We have a fantastic panel Marilee Enos is the director of the UNH Technology Transfer Center at the New Hampshire Local Technical Assistance Program and a valuable member of our Public Works Awareness Committee and this New England Chapter Connects program. So good morning, Marilee, and thank you for being here. Eric Barassa, serving the greater Boston area, is the director of the Transportation Division of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council and the vice chair of the Boston Metropolitan Planning Organization, the Boston MPO. So we're happy and delighted to have Eric with us this morning. Elizabeth Sanderson is the bipartisan infrastructure law coordinator and principal program manager at the Capital Region Council of Governments in Connecticut. Welcome, Elizabeth. And Kristen Rebello, formerly Panucci. Some of you may know her as Panucci. Congratulations, Kristen, on your recent marriage. Kristen is the Community Grants Program Administrator for the Massachusetts Department of Transportation that includes 6 state-administered grant programs. So we'll be interested to hear what Kristen has to say as well. So welcome to our panel this morning. Before we get to questions and get the program started, I am going to ask, I'm going to go right to Marilee to lead us off with a few questions for our audience to get a better understanding of some of the challenges you're facing and offer some insights to enhancing grant applications. So Marilee, why don't you kick us off?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rich. Thank you all for being here with us. And again, happy Public Works Week. We are so glad you chose to be with us a little bit today for that. What I did put in the chat pod is what we would love to hear from those of you who are in the room about. I think many of us would agree that we're living through this kind of historical time in terms of the amount of funding that is available out there for infrastructure. And I think it's fair to say for some agencies, it's been kind of challenging to figure out where you fit in that, how to access that. And that's a lot of what led us to today's conversation is we really do want to make sure those even small local agencies are finding a way to access this funding and to apply for these grants and manage these grants. So certainly, hopefully you've attended the Grant Writing 101 session that Chapter Connects did in the past. That's available on the recording. If not, it's a great session. But what brings you here today? Are there specific challenges at the local agency level with finding, applying for, and managing grants? And we're thinking both pre and post award. Once you get that funding, what's the challenge that you then have using it? And, I can think of some of the things that I've discussed with local agencies, but we'd love to see what you would put in that chat pod for us. And I see we have one response from Tom: knowing, tracking, and completing all the required documentation for individual grants. Couldn't agree more. I'm going through a grant application right now, and I'm very fortunate to have university support for somebody who's tracking all that. And I imagine if I was doing this alone, it would feel pretty burdensome to try to nail down who needs to sign what, when it needs to be in. Roby has shared finding grants to cover costs for CDL driver training. Certainly, Federal Motor Carrier has put out some grants that are in support of the CDL and the commercial driving industry, but I haven't seen anything specific to training. So that can be a challenge of finding the right grant that fits what your need is. So I'll just say, if you can, as we move through today's conversation, feel free to keep adding to that. And I think Rich is going to maybe have some conversation, and we'll circle back to that to share a bit more, keeping up with what's available. Is there a certain time of year that most grants are posted? We're going to have some information to maybe help you with that today. So great questions. Rich, I think as we let them continue to put their thoughts in there, do you want me to jump into some tools to leverage for grant writing?
That'd be great, Marilee, if you could do that.
All right.
Let me do that.
I'm going to pull up my screen here and we will get right to it. All right, so thank you again for having me. I am not a grant writer. I have certainly written my share of grants, and many successful, some not successful. I've learned a lot. I do some training just to provide some basic introductions to grant writing for our local agencies. And what I want to do today is just share some tips and some tools, some things I have found that can help you find data. This is going to be super rapid fire. I promise to take up no more than like 10 minutes, so we're going to move fast. But Regina will have some information that will link you out to all of these resources I talk about. I also have a QR code. So we've captured all of these sites and all these data sources I'll be sharing on our website. So don't worry that we're moving through this at a speedy rate. That is what I intended. Just want you to know there is some help out there, and see if maybe some of these will be of assistance to you in your own efforts. First, I want to talk quickly about probably what you've all been hearing about, AI. And I have just recently started using AI for many different things in my day-to-day world. I'm always curious what others are using AI for. So certainly if you have started using AI, please hit me up. I'd love to chat with you and always learning what I can do with it. But for grant writing, it's got some great opportunities. Everything from editing a proposal that you've been writing or pieces of that proposal, helping you with narrative development, helping you. Just this morning, I put together a letter of intent for a grant package that I'm writing, and I was able to send out a template letter of intent to agencies that I was hoping will sponsor or help us with this proposal. And I was able to use AI for that. I use Chat GPT, but I'm not recommending Chat GPT over one or the other. There are a lot of options out there. That's just what I'm familiar with. One thing I would suggest if you are interested in seeing how you can use AI for grant writing, if you just do a search of grant writing with Chat GPT on YouTube, you're going to find all sorts of resources and videos to help you with that. Keep in mind that AI or Chat GPT or whatever you use, it's not a grant writer. So it is a tool to help you in the grant writing process, but you still need to be really clear and really careful what you're ultimately using for content. You want to be aware of bias or errors or outdated information. You want to make sure that there aren't any inaccuracies. So it's not a ready to go response that it's going to give you, but it can definitely help you. Do be aware though of ensuring accuracy and considering that data and that source. Wanted to share just a couple prompts that you might find helpful to get you thinking about how to use AI to help with your grant writing. These are a couple examples here. You prepare a template letter of intent suitable for these types of industry associations. And then I listed the 2 association websites that I was going to be sending this template to for an application form that this organization, me, is submitting to this grant. And I listed the NOFO. So anytime you can give AI some additional information or data to help it generate its response, it's helpful. And I just kind of started realizing that recently. You can ask it to go review a website. Specifically to get some information to pull back into its response. Similarly, if you need to write a summary highlighting the qualifications of these personnel for a water quality project focused on this grant, you could put in bullets, links to each of those people's LinkedIn profiles or their websites, your municipal website. So anytime you can help, they call it prompt engineering, but it's basically helping it with what kind of a language you want it to be using and to model a better response. So that's always good. Other examples here, you review our crash data, prepare a needs statement for road safety assessment funding for this grant, and then link it to the NOFO. Use this demographics info to write a diversity and inclusion statement for a proposal to this grant. If you're looking to connect certain partners, you can list those partner websites and please write a support statement for those types of partners. So lots of different things that you can do with it. And I apologize, I fell behind here a little bit. So draft a partnership support statement for a complete streets project. These are the agencies that will be involved. So certainly it can help you to get further, get a narrative drafted quickly. If you say, this is the grant I'm applying for, here's our agency website, please draft a narrative for this project. It can help with that. So again, check out AI. If you're new to grant writing, check out AI in general and let me know how you're using it. I'm loving what I can do with it, but just know that it is not an end product. It is a tool to help you in developing your end product. Moving right along, keeping with my promise to be quick here, did want to just share this warning message. If you are grant writing, I highly recommend checking all of the documents that you are going to need early in the process. I have encountered this particular Adobe error a few different times with some grant packages trying to just open a form that needs to be signed. I am so glad that I find this out well in advance and not the day that the grant package is due. So just my warning to you, always check your technology in advance. You don't want to be caught off guard. Couple of ways that you can find grants that might be of interest to you. If you're not familiar with the transportation.gov grants dashboard, this is a fantastic tool and we've got the link there, but you can go out and federal highway, particularly for local agencies, DOT is pulling together open grants that they are participating in. You can search for a type of grant that you're the eligible activities, the eligible applicants, and it'll give you some potential grant opportunities. So if you're not using this dashboard, I highly recommend checking it out. And again, we'll make sure you have the link to that. When it comes to getting data for your grant applications, want to just give you a couple data sources. Of course, NHTSA, the Fatal and Injury Reporting System, or FIRST, if you are looking for crash data. The other data source that you might find helpful is the USDOT Equitable Transportation Community ETC Explorer. And what that is you can look at different types of disadvantaged tracks and see where your community might fall, where there's a transportation burden that maybe you can write into your grant and how you will solve that transportation burden with the funding that you're requesting. So definitely check that one out. Great data, great information. The roadway safety data dashboard from NHTSA is also a fantastic way to look at your roadway safety information. The climate and economic justice screening tool, this is another good tool that I would recommend checking out. So they kind of similarly, they pull together areas of burden for climate and economic justice considerations for different communities. So you could see where your community might fall in, challenges getting to medical appointments or having access to healthcare or having access to disease prevention or safe routes to school, whatever it might be. So definitely check this one out. There's some good information there. Moving on with some additional sources to get data, and all of this can help you with your narrative. That's why I want to share these tools, because if you're trying to tell the story of why that funding is important to you, it helps to know where your data is, what the metrics or the existing state is for your community. So check all of these out. Certainly look at things like opportunity zones, promise zones, choice neighborhoods. Any of those can be helpful to you as well. And those are all HUD related demographics and data that can tell you if you're in a community that's economically disadvantaged historically or currently, and that might help. The HEP GIS, this is also from DOT, and this is their data dashboard for things like equity in transportation, alternative fuel corridors, MPO and air quality. So you can get some environmental data from this. You can get some transportation data, some equity data. So this might be another great source to just help you build that kind of story of what you're trying to apply for. Same for the EPA's environmental justice screening and mapping tool. Another thing where you just put in your location and it's going to give you some data about that location and perhaps some of the challenges that your community is facing when it comes to environmental justice opportunities. So all good things to be aware of. I love this particular site. I'd only just recently discovered it, but CDC has a social vulnerability index mapper, and it looks at different levels of vulnerability for how a community can respond to a human or man-made or natural disaster. If there's a pandemic, how quickly can people get medical care? How quickly can they get supplies? So this is a kind of interesting view as well that might give you some interesting data based on what you're looking for. Last link, I think it's our last link here that I wanted to share with you, is the transportation.gov rural eligibility definition mapper. So we'll include this link as well. And this is helpful if you're trying to decide, are we a rural community? Do we qualify? Every grant is a little different. So they have some definition here that may help you. Check out Grant Application Bootcamp through Local Infrastructure. If you're not familiar with Local Infrastructure Hub or localinfrastructure.org, I highly recommend signing up to receive their newsletters. This is a group of civil or civic and municipal partners and others that have come together to try to really support getting the funding out there into local agencies. We talked about DOT Navigator in the past, but this is another great tool to just sign up to get their alerts. If you want to know what funding's coming out, they put out support and resources for grant writing, all really, really good stuff. So I wanted to just share those. And again, no detail on all of them, but you're going to have links to check them all out. The other thing I wanted to just share quickly here, and this is not ready for prime time yet, so I can't exactly share out this document, but I want us to be thinking creatively about in-kind match and local match. And I think the best way to do that is to start to have some examples, in my mind at least. So I have just started putting together a document where it kind of breaks out things like the amount of volunteer hours, how you can determine the value of volunteer hours, how you can determine the value of donations. If you have a print agency that's going to donate the printed flyers for you for a grant project that you're working on, what is that going to sponsor or look like towards your in-kind match? So check all that out. You'll be thinking about those sort of things if you're engaging for space, if you're hosting meetings related to a project that you have grant funding for, you might be able to get that donated space counted towards an in-kind match because you have a value of what it would cost you to go rent that space. Every grant program is different. You don't want to assume you can any of these are allowable, but I'm happy to share this out in more detail once I'm done with it. So if you're interested in this document, please let me know. I'm kind of just going through it now and thinking about the different utilities and space examples and that sort of thing. But I'd be happy to share it once I have it all buttoned up, because I think the more creative we can get in thinking about our options for in-kind match and local match, the easier it is to plug into some of these grants. Rich, I hope I didn't take up too much time. I'm going to pause and turn it over to you.
Phew. I think everybody was writing copious notes, I'm sure.
We'll share it all along.
But all of these links will be available to everyone. So great information, Marilee. So we're going to get to the panel, and we have some questions, and we did see a couple of questions in in the chat box already. And I saw Eric. I'm going to actually go to this. Was one of our questions that I had prepared, but they said, with all of the grants that come out constantly, do they come out certain times a year? I mean, how do you keep track of them? And I saw that you put a response in the chat box, but you want to talk a little bit about that, maybe?
Yeah, sure. And so for federal competitive grants, there are many grants that are coming out, literally every month. There's dozens and dozens of relatively new federal competitive grants that came out of the bipartisan, Infrastructure Act, and they're coming out, every month. And so I keep an eye on that key notices of funding opportunities site to see which ones are coming up, and some of them, they don't have the actual program details up. They just sort of give you a sense of when the announcements will be, like maybe they'll come out in June or July when the funding announcement will be, but at least that can give you a sense of what's on the horizon, what's upcoming for those federal discretionary grants.
Yeah. Elizabeth, I'm going to go to you too, because bipartisan infrastructure law grants, I mean, that's kind of your thing down in Connecticut. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So my position was created at the COG, the Council of Government level, to assist municipalities in our member towns, as well as becoming a resource for others in the region too, to track the funding opportunities that are most relevant to the needs of our region. So coming out of that Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, there's a lot of different names that people attach to that funding source, but it's a great opportunity to really plan and implement projects that affect all of our lives, the transportation, climate resiliency planning. So that notice of key, or that schedule that USDOT has of the key funding opportunities is a great source, and to plan in advance, really, because now that we're in year 2.5 of the program, of this 5-year plan, or 5-year act, we have some level of an idea of when these programs are coming out each year. So and some of them have been offered on a rolling basis, so that's helpful to know as well, like the Bridge Investment Program, for example. But yeah, subscribing to grants.gov newsletters is another way to track the opportunities that aren't just related to DOT. So, because there's a lot of opportunities out there for that $1 trillion that's available. So thank you.
Good information. Real good information. Well, one of the questions we had was, what is the most significant challenges municipalities are facing in managing, grant funded projects? I mean, and sort of the follow on to that is, creating those relationships. Kristen, you manage a lot of programs for Mass DOT. I think there's 6 of them. What do you see as the biggest challenge for municipalities trying to manage these grants?
Yeah, thank you. I think that one of the biggest things we see is capacity. We have obviously varied different communities across the state of Massachusetts, and some cities and towns just don't have the capacity internally to manage, write, and, track grants. And so one of the ways that I put it in the chat as well, is we're trying to make our process for the municipal grants easier and more streamlined so that it's not as much of a process to manage those grants from end to end. We have launched a new grant portal that houses our 6 programs so that you can better find resources and better track all of the whole process all the way through.
Well, that's good. That's good information to have as well. So one of the things, obviously, with any of these programs is to have a good working relationship with their DOT or their agencies that are administering these grants. Eric, tell us a little bit about how important is that, and what is the best way for municipalities to key into their local agencies or their MPO for that matter, or their local planning agencies?
Yeah, I think for the federal dollars that come, to each state and each region by formula, the process for how those funds get distributed, there's a lot more, I feel like, openness about what are the goals of DOTs and metropolitan planning organizations. And I think early on, I think it's really important for municipalities when they have a project concept to engage either with their local DOT contact, if there's like a highway district office or something like that, or the staff at their MPO, and start to let them know what is the project, what are the goals of the project, and that's going to help understand how to align that with what are the sort of the regional goals that the MPO might have, or the state goals that the DOT has, and I think that will also help the municipality understand what are some of the evolving design guidelines that various DOTs and even MPOs have and are going to want to see. I can speak for the Boston region. When we fund a reconstruction of a roadway, we're not just looking to sort of bring that roadway back into its current condition necessarily. We want to upgrade it. We want to see sidewalks on both sides of the street. We'd like to see bicycle lanes incorporated. We'd potentially like to see them to be separated bike lanes. We'd like to know if you can't do that, why not? And if it means preserving parking, we might ask you to do a parking study to tell us, what the utilization is. We like to see intersections to potentially be turned into modern roundabouts, and if you need to explain why that can't be done. So there's a lot of evolving design standards that sometimes can cause issues if the municipality is not really up to speed on kind of what are the goals of the funding program.
I just have a quick follow-on for you with that, and that is, how important is it to not only get town hall or city hall involved and informed on these projects, but the constituents as well? Because we know that a lot of this can die on the vine once you get to the public process, right?
Yeah, I think we, you can't underestimate the public process, and you need to do a really good job. And that's where I think, marrying, getting those concepts, connecting early with your funding partners, whether it's DOT or MPO staff, but then designing a good public process and getting public engagement early, particularly if you're looking at redistributing street space, if you're looking at taking a travel lane. I mentioned parking earlier. If you're looking to remove parking for other things, we know those are super controversial issues. It doesn't matter if it's in downtown Boston or in a rural community. Those are going to be super controversial, and they just require a lot of process. And I think it's important also to be clear up front, who's the decision maker? And I think that's an important thing to say to the public too. Is the mayor the decision maker? Is the select board or town or city council, or is this something that has to come to town meeting because there's a funding request involved? Or are there other processes locally that require like a townwide vote because there's certain easements or eminent domain needed for projects? So I think being clear up front about what is the sort of the process for decision making and building that into the project timeline, because we often see projects that need to deal with these issues. Those can be the delays, is getting to the point where locally some of these tough decisions can be made.
Yeah, thanks. Elizabeth, same type of challenges in Connecticut? Tell us about what those challenges are and how to overcome them.
Oh, yeah. Definitely capacity, staffing shortages on the municipal level. There's also frustration that, you spent so much time applying for a grant and then you don't get the good news you wanted. So one of the best things I have to offer is templates of applications. So we go through the notice of funding opportunity and identify what the program goals are, and try to create a checklist that is a little more comprehensive than some of the checklists that you might find associated with a program, but that really gets into the making this application so airtight that nobody could say no, right? Making that compelling story, connecting our solution, our proposed solution to solving that problem, and making it so clear and providing that resource, upon request to our members and state as well. But yeah, so capacity as well as local match is another thing too, coming up with those commitments for local match cost share requirements within that window of the application period. So knowing, planning for those funding opportunities before they're announced, making sure you're budgeting, having these conversations when you're developing your budgets, or hey, maybe we have a grant, a loose fund available for grant match for our projects on the municipal level to prepare for these opportunities when they come up, because sometimes there's not a lot of time to go through a council approval or referendum even to obtain the approvals necessary to dedicate funding to meeting match requirements. So, and then that in-kind contributions. So like Marilee mentioned early on, getting creative with the in-kind contributions. Those are some challenges that we've seen. Although there is sometimes reporting requirements, more strenuous reporting requirements related to those valuation type of in-kind matches. So making sure you're budgeting grant administration. So a lot of these opportunities you can get money for yourself to administer the grant. So making sure you're budgeting that and taking advantage of that opportunity too, so that you're preparing for that in the case that you do get the grant, the cat catches the car. How can you get, set yourself up for success in managing? So maybe, having that grant administration fees, you can hire more staff to manage that grant using those fees too when they come in. Thank you.
No, that's an excellent segue to my next question, and I'm going to Kristen for this one. And that is, what are the key steps municipalities should take to ensure successful grant management? Like, so there's the post-reporting, there's the compliance. How do they organize themselves throughout the process? And again, you have, as I mentioned, you have several grants you're managing, and I'm sure that you see that some municipalities are spot on, and others are like, they need some hand holding. So what is the best way? What are those tips that we can share with municipalities in terms of managing their grants?
Absolutely. I think there's two things, and Eric touched on one of them, and that's to know who to contact to get the right information. So your local aid offices, or if you're going federal, the offices that have the best guidance for those requirements, that's really important. And the second is to really communicate. We see a lot of times that someone will submit an application and completely be missing parts of the application. And then we have to spend a lot of time communicating what that is, where if they had just asked us before, they would have been a lot better off. So we say if you have questions, if you have any guidance that's needed, to really just communicate with the people managing the grants, because they can really help you through and guide you better to get those certain requirements and better understanding of what you need.
Do you see that there are more challenges in certain aspects of that grant management? Like, okay, the application is one thing, but now we have the grant, and I think Elizabeth just said it, the cat caught the car. Now what? Do you see that there are certain aspects of the grant that don't get as much attention as they probably should?
Yeah, and I think we all fall into this trap a little bit. We tend to work in our own silos, where we don't communicate with all the groups that need to be communicated with. And when you're not, sometimes we see a grant not even get picked up after being awarded. And we have to communicate with various departments within that municipality because they didn't even know that they had money to spend on the project they're working on.
Good point.
So staying in communication with members of your municipality that, like the construction section needs to work with the grant writers, and like it all needs to fall in place together. And if you continue to work in your silos and never reach outside your own group, you may not know that you have money or that that project was already applied for. We often see like a mayor and a DPW director apply for the same project and not even realize that they applied for the same project. So like it's really important to make sure that you're communicating throughout your municipality as well as with us.
It's interesting. I know of a project, and Safe Routes to School was administered through school departments. And at the site visit, the Public Works Department had no idea that there was even a project going on. So these are great points.
Yeah.
Eric, I don't know if you want to add anything to this.
Yeah, I think definitely, we never underestimate, that the left hand's not talking to the right hand, right? Like that happens a lot. And I think, yeah, that type of internal coordination at the municipal level is really important. I think we often see a disconnect between like planning departments and DPWs. And I think, getting those folks on the same page. I think being clear also who is the project manager. My advice for municipalities is to actually create an internal scope of work. I think we often rely on like procuring consultants and then being like, oh, the consultant will be the project manager and I'll just let them kind of drive the thing forward and show up. I think actually the municipal staff really need to say like, we're the project manager, create an internal scope with tasks, identify hours for each of those tasks, and a timeline, and identify what are those key milestones, and work with the consultant to flesh that out so that you understand what is the time commitment involved in managing. Some of these grants are small, but some of the bigger ones, when we're talking multi-million-dollar, roadway construction jobs, bridge jobs, I mean, these are massive projects, and you need to do those classic project management things like scheduling that reoccurring, monthly or biweekly meeting, cancel it if you don't need it. But, those are some of the basic things to stay on top of it. But I think really empowering the municipal staff to be like the project manager is really critical.
We got a comment in the chat box from Greg Riley. Thank you, Greg. And what he says, when they get a grant, they have an implementation meeting with their finance department, the project manager, the grant writer, and they assign duties for who's responsible for doing what. And that's a great tip. Just to follow on what you're saying, Eric, as well, to just make sure that there are things not falling through the cracks.
Yeah. Can I add another comment on the match? I know there's a lot of consternation out there, especially among local cities and towns, about not having match for a lot of the federal discretionary grants. And my sort of tip is like, in applying for these grants, you don't have to document the match. You just check a box in most of these grant applications. I don't know if there's anyone from Federal Highway Administration
that are going to be calling you soon.
You don't have to document the match. You don't have to say that the match is coming from this account or anything like that. And so my advice is apply for these federal grants. And if you get them, there's probably a strong chance that your state DOT or your MPO or someone will help you find the match. You can always say, okay, we couldn't find the match, you don't get the grant. But I feel like there's too much concern out there about not being able to have the match. And I think to the points being made about even investigating in kind, I think that's something Federal Highway can work with folks on too when you get the grant, is how to document, in kind. So my advice is to err on the side of applying for grants and not worrying too much about where the match comes from.
Oh, good point. And that's actually a good segue into that question, because that was, what advice do you have for local agencies when it comes to a local match? And Marilee, I know you had you're putting some information together. You want to talk a little bit about this?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Not ready for prime time yet, but I've just been breaking out, if your DPW administrative assistant is overseeing and coordinating marketing efforts, how do you apply that time as an in-kind match? If your law enforcement team is helping to do a crash study or analysis of crash rates, can that apply as a local match? If your university is donating space for the program meetings, can that be an in-kind match? So looking at like volunteer hours, and I'm trying to run through an exact example with one particular grant, and that'll be my final document, but just showing how a community can come up with in-kind and local match by using their partners and by leveraging the space where they're meeting, and other opportunities for donations. It all comes together maybe a little more easily than you might think it will once you kind of start getting into it. But again, every grant's different. You want to make sure you read what's allowable and what's not.
So Elizabeth, have you seen, I know a lot of the bipartisan infrastructure law grants that are out there, there is a requirement for that. What have you seen in terms of, some creative ways? And Eric has just provided some really good insight. If you're going to apply, we'll deal with that when we get to it, and maybe find some ways to deal with it. But what are you seeing with some of your grant programs?
Yeah, so the two come to mind, Safe Streets and Roads for All, SS4A, and that is kind of a really check the box. Oh, we'll find the match later. No commitment letter necessary at the time of application, and that's been a popular program in Connecticut. And the second program that comes to mind is the RAISE grant, which is a reimagining of Tiger, Build, RAISE now. And that one is a little more, we had, a little more of a sturdy commitment needed with the application materials. So it does depend on the federal program. I know there's the formula funding too that's coming from the state that has increased as a result of the BIL. So, and then also other state agency offerings through their state departments, like in Connecticut, we have the Department of Energy, Environmental Protection, or DEEP. Sorry if I got those E's mixed up, but they have more funding available, and through the state program. So some folks are more comfortable applying for state funding as opposed to federal, because it's kind of a scarier process for them. But right, don't be afraid of the process, and feel free to reach out with questions too. That is my job title, right? To provide assistance for these grants, these federal grants, but also, if I have information on the state grants too. So, and I'm sure each state kind of has their own person like me or agency set up for that type of technical assistance. So, right, each grant does have different requirements, and you want to make sure you understand them, to Marilee's point too, before you get too involved. But right, don't be afraid to apply, for sure.
You may find that we have some of our public works and municipal partners in Vermont calling you, so or New Hampshire or Maine or any place else, right?
They're welcome to subscribe to our funding newsletter too, and check out our webpage, which has links to those federal websites, and there's federal technical assistance programs, to that point of going right to the source, right? Don't be afraid to go to the federal program manager with your questions. They have a whole email address, and they're very responsive. So thank you, Rich.
So Kristen, there are several grant programs, and interesting. Eric and I had a discussion at a recent MPO meeting about project readiness. And there's really two components of this. There's project readiness, but there's also articulating the need, the purpose and need of the project. And can you talk a little bit about someone's applying for a shared streets or a complete streets project? Can you lay out a little bit as to what is important? What are the reviewers looking at? Obviously, project readiness is important, particularly on TIP funded projects that are programmed. But what are the reviewers looking at when someone's applying for one of these grant programs?
Sure. So obviously every program's different and has different focuses on what they're looking for. Some of our programs lend themselves to quick build, which obviously project readiness is more important there when you're just ready to go with it, so that it can be built pretty quick and implemented quickly. We saw a lot of those come out of the pandemic with our Shared Streets and Spaces grant. And, I think that reviewers are really looking for that your community, your municipality has really hashed out all of the details of the project, whether that it includes public engagement, because we get a lot of projects that come through that then we get some opposition from the communities and from participants in it. So really making sure that you're going through and you're working out the details. Permits, that seems to be a little bit of an impediment with grants lately, is that the permitting process for a lot of right-of-way situations and things like that can be really difficult. So knowing what you need and getting that done before you're applying for these grants is important. And then trying to check off as many boxes as you can with one project is really great. Like, when we're talking complete streets, we have a bunch of countermeasures and they're really well listed in our guidance documents. Really making sure that you're hitting all of those targets is really important for the reviewers to see as well.
Eric, what's important to the MPO? When those mayors are coming in and they're saying, gee, our project is very, very important. We really hope that you'll consider it or move it up. And of course, it wouldn't be before the MPO if it wasn't important, right? Well, at least we think that, right? But what's the MPO looking for?
I think we are looking to understand what is the project really accomplishing? Is there just a really bad asset that needs to be preserved and rehabilitated? And that, that's well documented, okay. But is the project, doing something that's trying to, encourage economic vitality, spruce up a downtown, really focus on safety? I think coming in and really documenting and explaining what is the overall goal of the project. I even recommend to cities and towns, like, put a face to the project. If you have a group of supporters, have them submit letters or come to a meeting in person, or if it's a virtual meeting, ask them to provide some testimony and talk about why that project's important to them, safe routes to school or anything dealing with kids. I remember a project actually years ago. There was a town that wanted to have the MBTA put in a handicap accessible mini high platform for the commuter rail, and they actually, the town put together a video that documented how there was a boy in town that wanted to take the train to Fenway Park to see the Red Sox, and he couldn't get on the train because the platform wasn't handicap accessible. And they put a 2-minute video together showing this, and things like that put a face to the project. I think those are things that can stick with you, but really talking about what are the goals beyond just kind of fixing what we have. I think is really important.
Do you want to add anything to that, Elizabeth, down in your way?
I think just quickly, the grant application formula, make sure you understand your problem, identify it properly, what it is, clearly define what your proposed solution is, and make that clear connection about how your solution will solve the defined problem that aligns with that grant. And maybe you have to make some minor adjustments to your project to better align with a grant, or maybe that's not the right grant for you. So that's another something to think about. Like if you're not hitting all those program goals, are there ways that you can make minor adjustments, or even, you know, expand beyond your scope, think beyond what you've been thinking about to make that funding source viable option for your project. But yeah, scope, budget, schedule. I love that idea about defining those roles and responsibilities. Tap into your finance directors. They already have sam.gov registrations, most likely. And if you don't know what sam.gov is, then, you know, that's the first start to applying for federal grants. You need that registration. So, but other folks in your towns might have that information. So make sure you're communicating. Yeah. So
Awesome.
thank you.
Yeah. So as you all know, New England Chapter Connects, we are strictly go 1 hour and 1 hour only. I think we only had one. Regina could probably remind me of this. We had one that we actually went over, but we try to keep to an hour. I'd like to go around with the panel. You know, grants it's to me, it's a very broad thing. It's like, I like food. Like, okay, well, there's 1,000 things, right? And what I'd like to do is just go around and have the panel just sort of in closing, you know, some best practices, best management practices, identifying opportunities, using data, all of those things. If you had to sort of sum this up, you've been called upon to go to XYZ community, and they're saying, what do we do? Tell us about some best management practices that you would offer to a community. Let's start with Kristen.
Of course, you started with me. So again, my focus is on municipal grants. So this is a little smaller focused for me. But my advice to any municipality is really utilize the resources around you. So for us, Chapter 90 is our bread and butter. It has been around since the 70s. And it is a lot broader than a lot of our grant guidelines. So I think that it's really important to take a look at what funding sources you have and where that can fit for the project that you're looking to fund, and make good relationships with the local aid office in your district, as well as with our group, and reach out and make sure communication is your first step. If you have any questions, or if you have any needs in your community, someone's always willing to help and guide you through that. So I think relationships and looking at the resources that are available are really important parts.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I like that lasting message is using those existing channels and of communication, the MPOs, or we have monthly meetings with the state DOTs. So if you're in a municipality and you want to bring your concerns to the COG or MPO, we can help elevate that to DOTs at monthly meetings and really get aligned together with our mission, which is really to improve our communities collectively. So working together as on the individual level, right up through the federal government level, and that creating those lines of communication, using those existing channels to really empower each other. I think that's a maybe more general, broad, overarching best practice. But building trust with communities is also key for government relations too. So then that
Great points. Great points. Eric, how about you?
You know, as a representative of a planning agency, I'd be remiss to not sort of focus on, I think it's really important to do really good local planning first to identify, what your needs are, and then see, every planning process should end with how do you fund the recommendations? And the small things, that's where you can go after smaller state, grant opportunities or things like that. For the big projects, that's usually where we look for our federal dollars and those are going to be much more time intensive. And I think going in with eyes wide open about what's going to be involved in managing those bigger, 5, 10, 10, 15, 20, $30 million projects, that, those are just going to be more time intensive, and doing all those, getting all the folks internally, like Elizabeth was talking about, being on the same page. But I think it starts with good local planning to know, like, what are the small things that could be done with local resources? What might you need to go after a $500,000 or $1 million grant, for the state, and then for those bigger federal things, what are those key projects that you might only get one of those, every decade or so, depending on the size of your community.
Great information. Marilee, anything to offer while we're at the end here?
No, I think they've all done a wonderful job sharing tips, and definitely if there's anything else, check your LTAPs. Your LTAPs are always happy to try to point you towards resources as well, and they've built great relationships with the agencies, represented today and elsewhere. So they're another good resource to be aware of.
Awesome. Well, we had a great panel today. Want to thank the panel for being here. You are all very accessible, and so we hope that all of those who were on the program today will reach out if they need help. You can see the QR code there. But again, want to thank everybody for attending. Want to thank the panel. And Regina, why don't you bring us home?
All right, awesome. Oh, thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, the QR code for evaluation, we want to hear how we did today. And I also put the URL in the chat box. So thank you very much.
Have a great day, everybody, and happy National Public Works Week.
Thank you.